Chantra Powell with Proven Not Perfect, and I am so full of emotion and joy to be here today with a bad sister, bad meaning good. If you know, you know. She is not only an amazing spirit, which you'll come to hear and perhaps see in our talk, but she is very accomplished. She's currently Vice President HR, Global Chief Diversity Officer for Boston Scientific. I believe you're still on the board for SHRM. Is that correct?
The SHRM Foundation Board.
The SHRM Foundation Board. So she's not only making moves at Boston Scientific, y'all, she's making moves for all of us across any company, anywhere, right? So that in and of itself is beyond impressive to me. But I'm gonna have to give a rose and a flower and say that her first decision to choose service
to all mankind
by becoming a member of the illustrious sorority, Alpha Kappa Alpha Sorority Incorporated, I think only speaks to and somewhat predicted how she would choose to live her life of excellence. And so I am honored to call her sister soror, and yes, I'm also honored to call her friend of family. Her name is Camille Chang Gilmore. Hi, Camille.
Hi, Sandra. I tell you, Sister Soror, it is a pleasure to be here with you. Oh, and you know what? My most important title is mom and daughter.
Oh, girl, talk about it.
Yeah.
Mom. So you know what? That important title, I think, sets the complete stage for what's on my mind. So, you know, in the spirit of Proven Not Perfect, I really like to pull from my village of all stars, which you are one, and have topical conversation. Of course, we have the swag and all of the great accomplishments that we just introed with, but I think that one thing we also offer is the blessing of experience, the blessing of wisdom and discernment, and the boldness to talk about it. Right?
Yeah.
And so that's what I'm hoping to set the stage. And what you just said, one of my important roles is being mom and daughter. So earlier today, I'm gonna tell you a little story. Earlier today, I took a walk and I listened to this podcast, and I won't even shout it out because it was really random. It's the only first one that I listened to, and I really got something from it. But it got me thinking about this conversation with you today. So in the podcast, it was a doctor, medical doctor, female, and she was talking on the topic of menopause, right? And she was talking about how, as women, we enter into this season where there's not much written and certainly not much shared, because there has been a little bit of a taboo about what is happening to us, right? And she went on to go back to the history of why this was kind of taboo. She went back to the late 1800s, 1860s, I believe. And it was a French doctor who actually gave it the name menopause. And if you broke it down, it essentially meant to the end, right? To the clear end, right? And this is what happens to women. We get to the clear end.
Yeah.
And that wasn't good enough for her. And so she started to research more, and she found another doctor, female doctor, who committed her life to studying in tribes in Africa. And in those tribes, she started to see how it revealed that women, as the matriarch, were grandmothers, and how grand this role of grandmother was, and how much it wasn't just a life force for the woman herself, it was an absolute life force for her family, right? Because now daughters were able to hunt and gather, and sons and all that. Fast forward, I started thinking about, we don't talk a lot about career in the same sense.
Yeah.
My mom and dad did a wonderful job of making it clear, understand what you're really good at, get a great education, right? Get a great education, get a good job, right?
Yeah.
Work
Yeah.
hard at that good job.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay, that was great. But now that I look back and I think about being a mom and being a daughter, how important is it for us to unpack the myths that maybe were created way back when and dispel them, and also to start to create a new way of thinking based on our leg of this race, if we think about it as a relay race, and what might be important going forward. So you, my dear, if you choose to accept this challenge,
yes,
get to sit with me in this space, and I'd love to have this conversation, right? And so I'm going to stop talking for a minute, and I'm just going to ask you a simple question. If you think back to what you were told and what you thought when you began your career journey, right?
Yeah.
What were your guiding principles? What were your truths, and what did you expect? Yeah.
Wow. What were my truths and what did I expect? Well, a couple of things I think that's really important is to recognize that I'm a daughter of immigrants. I'm Jamaican Chinese, so I know when people heard my name Chang, they were like, probably, where's that Chinese come from? And my dad was half Chinese and came up from Kingston, Jamaica. And my mom was a nurse. My dad was the prime minister's personal bodyguard and in the police force, and he rode bikes. So they were the upper echelon in the Jamaican community. And then they came to the United States to ensure that their kids had a better life. But when you come to the United States, you don't know the political systems, the nuances. And one of the things that my mom and dad had to do were work really hard. My mom worked 3 jobs after my dad died to put us through school. And people say, how is that even possible? She's a nurse. So she worked at one hospital 7 to 3, another hospital 3 to 11, and then took on another job on the weekends just to ensure that her kids had the best. And the one thing I recognize with my mom, she never complained, never. She did what she had to do and got it done. And that's one of the things I think that has come with me, which is I've seen how hard she has worked to even get me to where I am. And everything I am is because of her. And it's wonderful now that as she has, and I have to say this, her life has been saved by the work that I do. I work for an amazing company, Boston Scientific, and we do a lot of non-invasive devices. And because of what they've done and created, my mom is right now living beyond probably what was expected. She has now, since her procedures, I've gotten 2 extra years with her, 2 extra years of wisdom, 2 extra years of learning diplomacy.
Yes, girl.
That is part of my career, and it couldn't have come at a more better time. One of the things, Sandra, we were talking about is that right now we're in such VUCA times. So if you haven't heard that word VUCA, it's the volatile, uncertain, complex, and ambiguous times. And in this crazy time, post-COVID, post the pandemic, you're either in one of 2 camps. Either you're in COVID fatigue or you're in COVID clarity. And I think one of the things that COVID clarity has done for many is bring about what they will do and what they won't do related to their career. So for me, when I even look at my career now and what I was told, when I graduated from Penn State and then even went on and got my MBA from the University of Illinois, one of the things that, I thought you did was you showed up in your blue suit, white shirt, and, and you had your Coach bag maybe, and and you walked into a room and you shared your skills, not knowing that, you could be joining an organization and 2 weeks later, and this happened to me, they sold the organization and now I was in a reduction in force. I didn't know that, I would then have to move back across the country and maybe do something different. to start my HR career, and maybe even be an ombudsman for the University of Illinois, and learn union contracts, which I thought to myself, how is this going to help me?
Yeah.
But then later, being the director of an MBA program and recruiting talent, and I thought, how is this going to help me in my corporate career? And then moving to Oregon. Yes, y'all, I lived in Oregon for 5 years.
Wow.
And my husband, who's an amazing individual and my life partner, had an opportunity in Oregon, and we went. And for 5 years, I had to figure it out. And yes, in a lot of ways, I was the only one. We were the only family of color in that area. But we then had to figure out, was this going to make us or break us? And it actually made us, never broke us. And we had amazing friends and just had an amazing experience. But then we came back and decided to be in Atlanta, where I reside. And being here, I will tell you, I learned that things are going to happen. You're going to join an organization. And again, when I moved to Atlanta, I was joining one organization that then was sold and then acquired by another organization, to which I'm in now. So
you can't predict it. You can't. I mean, I think, so I want to go back to something you said regarding your mom.
Yes.
You said you watched your mom do all these things for her family and she didn't complain.
Yes.
I want to unpack that a little bit, because I think that speaks volumes for how we launch in our initial career journey, right? Yeah. It's so impacted by what you see and what the drivers were for your family, right?
Yeah.
I'm going to say this, and I don't know if this is your case, because similar to you, so my mom and dad, both from deep South Mississippi and Louisiana, and mom lost her mom when she was a little girl, and was largely raised by her village of aunts, right? Just amazing story for me about a woman who could move with such grace and beauty without having that role model necessarily right before her all the time. Her sisters for sure, and her aunts for sure, but not her mom, right? And she would go and do the things that she did. And then when she became mom, right, as I'm aware as a young kid, I watched her support my dad, who also hardworking man, had his own story, but for the sake of this conversation, we're gonna focus on the ladies in the room, right?
Yes.
And I watched her pursue her master's degree, with 2 girls at this point, and a husband who was working, who came from a generation where their job was to be out the house doing what they did. And if you want to do all the other things, you do them, but you're doing them with this stuff, right? And so she did it all, and I never saw her complain. Never. And so I wonder, as I look back at early career Chantra, who showed up for the assignment, got in there, only knew to work hard, only knew to use every resource and tool that I had, but also didn't complain.
Yeah. And my mom also, not only did she not complain, she used diplomacy. She always talks about that. You have to watch your words, understand. And my husband has taught me this too, that tone and tenor can really shift a conversation. And I didn't realize that until he brought that to my attention. But my mom, one of the things that she shared with me, she says, she believes that we're where we are because we stopped trying to meet in the middle. Right now, everything has to be so absolute. It has to be my way or no way. Yeah. And we didn't come this far with that mindset.
No.
The reason we were even able to make progress over the years is because we at least agreed that we may disagree, but then felt there was a compromise to then move us forward. And I think that's one of the things that, as I look at our society, that I think that we're missing right now. I think one of the things I'm even coaching my team on you got to figure out how you can disagree without being disagreeable.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
And you really have to think about, is your emotions ruling your intelligence? Right. When I say that, there's so many different things that are happening in this world that get us emotional.
Yeah.
But we all know foundationally what is right and what is wrong.
Yeah.
And the people who are helping, who are hurting. And rather than then caught up in the emotion, take a step back, separate yourself for a minute and say, okay, what do I know for sure?
Yes.
Right.
Yeah.
And once you say, this is what I know for sure, separate your we've had so many things happen in the last few years of this country. Yeah. Anti-Semitism, Asian hate, the daylight death of George Floyd, the attack on policy and discriminatory acts for the LGBTQ plus community. Yeah. It's crazy. And it's happening in countries around the world like Poland and Australia and Canada and the United States. And I think some of the things that we have to recognize is that, what do we know for sure? This could either be a moment where we can use our influence for great promise, or we could just fall into the peril. And I think if we're able to separate our emotions, it can help us guide us to do what's right. Foundationally, I live by the philosophy of, I don't lie, cheat, or steal, nor tolerate anyone who does. Yes. And when you have a role like mine, where you're leading human resources, but also responsible for the global diversity, equity, engagement strategy for the company, you have to do what's right for everyone, not for just one. That is then going to move the organization forward. And I think it's just important to recognize that you have to understand separate, in your day-to-day as a working woman, you're going to come across things that just cause you to feel disappointed, angry, and you may even feel hurt. Yeah. But I think you have to step back and say, okay, move my feelings aside. What am I trying to accomplish? What outcome am I looking for? And then what role do I want to play? And what role do I want others to play to help move things forward?
So then let me ask you this. So go back circa, I'm going to say early 2000s. There was a lot of talk in corporate leadership around emotional intelligence. And you remember that series of books and lessons learned about emotional intelligence? And at the time, there was a big movement around the best leaders will demonstrate emotional intelligence. I almost feel like what you're saying is the +1 to that conversation, right? Yeah. Because before you can get in tune with giving yourself a time out, you have to actually be aware. And I think that's what the heart of that book, right?
But I'd add trust and empathy. Yeah. Right now, as we move into this post-pandemic day, the leaders who are going to be successful will need to understand trust and empathy and how to showcase those two things.
So tell us double click on both of those so that we can normalize what that means in the context of what you're saying.
Do you create a level of psychological safety where your employees can come to you and say to you personal things about what's going on in their life? Yeah, they're buying a new home, having a baby, or maybe someone in their family suffering from mental illness and they may need to take time off in order to help them. How are you supporting them? How are you showing up to let them know that you care? And I know, I'll be the first to tell you, I'm a very, what they call red person. I'm an execution oriented. They call it being brief, be bright, and be gone. That's how I kind of show up sometimes.
Yes, I might have a lot of that red in me too, but
yeah. And what I often want to do or need to do, many would think that and the green, and there's a tool that we use called Insights. And if you're red, you're an execution machine. If you're yellow, you want to be inclusive. If you're blue, you're into the details, and green is you care. And there's more to it than just that, but I'm kind of summing it up. I'm red and yellow, so I execute, but I need to feel included. And then what happens is my blue, the details and the caring are equal at the bottom, and they only rise when under stress. So if there's deadlines and I feel that people are not giving me things that I need, I get very blue and very detailed real quick. Or I do leverage my caring piece and saying, well, how is this going to impact someone, and so forth. But I think, as you unpack that, it really is that psychological safety. But then when I talk about empathy, are you paying attention to your team's burnout? Are you paying attention to the fact that someone on your team may feel hopeless? Are you paying attention to the fact that someone on your team may have anxiety, or in your family, and how are you dealing with that? The key thing that I
and wait a minute, I have to double click. How do you balance that though with the red expectation? Because the reality is, if you are privileged to assume to leadership, those demands short term are real, right? And especially if you're in a publicly traded situation, right? Those leaders are going to feel the pressure of performance. So how do we effectively suggest these women leaders, or these leaders, not even just women, these leaders, balance that empathy, compassion, time out with the need to execute?
So the first thing as a leader you have to recognize is that there is a correlation between mental wellness and it's linked to economic volatility. There's the World Health Organization recently put out a statement, I remember, that said that we lose $1 trillion of productivity. 1 trillion.
Wow.
Due to just anxiety and depression alone.
Wow. So you're not getting the execution anyway.
No, so exactly. So if you don't pay attention to that as a leader in your workplace of work and in your home, you're losing opportunity to really have a healthy and happy home as well as team. And it's hard because that means you have to kind of almost reconcile your own mental state. And to do that, I just got off a call earlier today where I said to folks, you've got to focus on your mental, physical, and spiritual. And if you're really going to even help others, you've got to do that yourself. One of the things that my husband so one of the things I probably want to add is, although my greatest titles are mother and daughter, there's the other one that's wife. And whether you have a partner or a spouse, get someone who encourages you, but wants also the best for you. And so what we do is we do focus on our mental, physical, and spiritual. And I do little things, and I'll just share what I do. Monday, Wednesday, and Friday, I wake up at 5 a.m. and I go work out with a trainer and a team. We call it our lifetime fitness family, right? Other women who are like me, going through menopause, going through life, kids, empty nester, you name it, we probably have all been through it.
That's real.
But it's so awesome. But they're so inspiring. There's one lady who's in her mid-60s who's just amazing and so inspiring. And so it starts with the physical, right? But also look at your circle and who's around you making you better, right? And these ladies are just fantastic. One's an entrepreneur, one's a corporate raider. And it's just wonderful to then recognize that not only am I taking care of my physical while I'm with them, they're also helping me with my mental and putting things in perspective on how I need to be pushing myself, or even just having that camaraderie to say, hey, I'm there with you and we're going through it together. And then on Tuesday and Thursdays, I do Pilates. Let me just tell you, ladies and gentlemen, it is amazing.
Oh,
amazing. Pilates goes after those little muscles, but it's just so wonderful to wake up in the morning then again and have some time for myself. And then it's on the drive to and from each of those, listening to something positive in my head, whether it's great music, great gospel music, or whether it's listening to the radio and just really trying to get some knowledge about what's happening in the world today. And now that I've taken care of my physical, my mental, it's spiritual. What are you doing? What higher power are you connecting with to really help you stay grounded and recognize that there's so much more to life and more to live?
That's right on. That right there. Because I think that when you do those 3 things, I think it does put you in a spot to be in tune to your own emotion, and to your point, to be more centered and actually being aware of what's happening emotionally around you. That's really huge. So then as you go back and you think about some of the change that's happened in your career journey, some of it happening to you, some of it happening driven by you or family, but all change, right? How is it that you have successfully grown through it all? Because you said something very interesting as I give you a minute to think about that. We're in these VUCA times, and some people have chosen and are in the lane of COVID fatigue, and some people have chosen or are in the lane of COVID clarity. And I'm going to say chosen because I do believe our spirits are called to something that we are choosing, right? And so how, so that there's always a choice in times of change, this just being the most extreme example of seasons that we're in. How is it that you chose to stay in a lane that kept you continually layering on even more impactful assignments and experiences? You didn't always understand why, but certainly you can now look back and understand how the layers made you are who you are and prepared you for what you're doing and going to do.
I think every experience is valuable. When I was coming up and as I look at my career, my first job was in sales and Federal Express, and they taught me about people, service, profit, right? Take care of people, they provide excellent service, you make money. I had to hustle. I had to figure out a new territory. I had to be around in a new city that I didn't know of in Chicago. And I just figured it out, right? And wasn't comfortable. It was actually very uncomfortable. And I remember sleeping on an air mattress and, having nothing but a vacuum in the early days.
Yes. I felt special when I could go shop at IKEA for a plastic sofa.
When I got a bed and some furniture, I was like, wow.
Big girl.
And then, I went and worked for Exxon, and I thought, I worked for such an amazing company, and I learned courage. I learned when invited to the table, take your seat at the table.
Yes.
And as Shirley Chisholm would say, if you're not invited to the table, bring a folding chair.
That's right on.
And I would. And that, having the hustle and then courage started to then build, right? And then I go and then work in recruiting for like IBM, and that was awesome. And I learned the value of talent and the value of people and the importance of development. And then I, moved to Oregon and worked in for the state of Oregon. Had no budget, but I had to learn to build relationships. I had to learn to work with nothing and make something. And then when it came to guidance in Boston Scientific, it was amazing because I had to, it all like came together. I started in sales. Now I was supporting a sales organization. I then, had to create different ways to recruit talent. Well, I worked in recruiting. Now I had to do it here. I then had to think about ways to have courageous conversations about what was working and what wasn't working. So that experience helped me, that I had to pull back up on from my earlier days. How do I have those conversations? Yes. It was just, it's amazing how the layers, when you're going through it, then build, right?
Yes.
And I think you have to enjoy the process. I know it's hard to say that, but with growth comes levels of pressure and uncomfortableness, but nothing is ever wasted. Every piece of growth, level of uncomfortableness that you're going through, I guarantee you will use it and leverage it someday. It may not be immediate, but you will. And, I have two amazing sons who I think respect and see that, life isn't easy. Yeah. But we have to push through. Yes. And if you can push through and get to the other side, oh, the joy and the fulfillment. I mean, it's no different than, when I had them as, pregnant, having babies, you go through all this pain. Yes. For such a wonderful outcome. Yes. Oh, wow. And for me, that's kind of what I try and remember, that all of this is not for naught. There's something that we're about to birth. And if you're going through it, it just means that there's something amazing on the other side.
Well, I'm gonna tell you, this is exactly the truth that debunks the myths about the career journey of a driven woman, a talented leader, and a visionary, right? I'm just going to highlight a couple of the ingredients that go into the sauce. Start with figure it out and hustle and courage. Move then to fully appreciating not only the value you bring, but the talent and value of others. Build those relationships, because you won't be able to figure it out by yourself. But if you build those relationships, you'll find that when the resources feel scarce for you, somebody else has something to share and offer. And this all comes together for the assignment that will be your breakthrough, right?
That's
and
right.
Your
wow.
Yes.
You are fantastic. You're yes. So good at this.
Oh, girl, I just tell you, I am so graced to have the village of all stars that I do. And I'm so super excited to share it with others. Thank you for your time. This has been amazing.
My pleasure, my sister, my soror. It was my pleasure.
Right on. Yes. Excellent. Okay. Well, I will talk to you later. See you later. Those husbands happen to be friends. And I'm going to tell you this, my husband, this is the most anticipated podcast that I have done ever. You should know. Never has my husband awakened and said, "You're podcasting today with Camille, aren't you?"
Well, the men of Omega are amazing.
Yes, that's what I'm gonna say. The men of Omega, when they have a mission that folks gonna connect and do some good stuff, it happens. That's right. All right, my love. Be well and take care. Thank you so much for blessing all of us. Bye.